Prime Minister Mark Carney has welcomed a new member to the Liberal team, Alberta MP Matt Jeneroux, who said last year he planned to resign after his name circulated as a potential defector, announced today that he is joining the government after all.
Quite honestly, it was the speech in Davos where you took everything head on, and I think for me that's where a lot of the world changed. I think it opened a lot of eyes for Canadians, Albertans, Edmontonians, just how serious this national unity crisis truly is. And it's for me, it felt disingenuine and quite simply wrong to be sitting on the sidelines anymore. So I reached out to the Prime Minister's office, and will be joining his caucus, and I couldn't be more proud to say thanks to you.
Excellent. Jeneroux is the third Conservative now to cross the floor to Carney's Liberals. Toronto area MP Michael Maude defected in December, and Nova Scotia MP Chris D'Entremont in November. Jeneroux's floor crossing brings the Liberals to 169 seats in the House of Commons, which means if the government wins these three upcoming by-elections, they'd secure a majority government. In a statement, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre said, quote, Mark Carney is trying to seize a costly Liberal majority government that Canadians voted against in the last election through dirty backroom deals. Matt Jeneroux has betrayed the people of Edmonton Riverbend who voted for affordable food and homes, safe streets, and a strong resource sector. Conservatives will continue our fight for a Canada that's affordable, safe, and self-reliant. Well, I, for one, am very glad to say the Power Panel is here to dissect all this. Amanda Alvaro is a former Liberal Party communication strategist. Tim Powers has worked as a strategist for Conservative parties. Zane Velji is a former strategist for the Alberta NDP. And here with me, Sherelle Evelyn is the managing editor of the Hill Times. And I will begin with you. He sort of says it's about Davos. I mean, I'm still trying to piece together what happened between the end of last year when he said he was resigning and today when he said he came over. What do you think pushed him?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, I do think that there was a bit of a sea change, like with the World Economic Forum remarks, because it was so well received by so many people, not just in this country, but outside of it. So to see that momentum, I'm sure could be, for any political operative, could be exciting to say, you know what, I want to get on that team. And that's something that I think a lot of Canadians are probably looking for. They want something to root for, not just root against. So if he saw an opportunity there, maybe, you know, he said he had conversations with his family about whether or not to actually follow through on his plan to resign. And if those conversations led to, because you really have to take into account crossing the floor, especially it seems right now from the Conservative Party, that is asking a lot for your personal well-being. You know, there's going to be a lot of mud slung your way, not just you, your family, like there's always going to be rumors flying about. So if they said to themselves, can we live with this in the pursuit of potentially something better that we see for the country, I mean, that's a big conversation to have. Whether or not that's, you know, exactly how it went, we can only guess, but.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, Tim, because like his clearly the leadership of Pierre Poilievre was part of the reason he was involved in conversations at the end of last year, and part of the reason that he decided he would step back and eventually resign. Clearly, nothing was fixed on that front, because he didn't say, well, you know, I'm willing to stick around. What does this do to Pierre Poilievre's leadership status?
How about I use a hockey metaphor?
All right.
Dave. And by the way, it is still, so I can work this in 1-1 in overtime, 7 minutes gone.
He's talking about the U.S.-Sweden match, the winner of which will go on to the semifinals, and depending on who wins, will decide who Canada plays. But please continue.
Yes, as your sports correspondent, I wanted to update you on that. Pierre Poilievre probably feels a lot like Czechia today. You know what? He had a good game. He had a good game against Justin Trudeau. Looked like he was going to win. It got stolen from him by Mark Carney. He had a good leadership convention, got an 87% vote. Looked like he was in a good place. Then Mr. Giovanni goes to Washington. He has to answer questions about that. And then today, Mr. Jeneroux crosses the floor. You know, when you're answering questions about your leadership as opposed to posing questions about the prime minister, that's not a great day for you. And by the way, the United States just scored, Peter. Quinn Hughes, former Vancouver Canuck. So there
There
you
you
go.
go.
Onward with my commentary. I would say this: look, Pierre Poilievre would rather be talking about Prime Minister Carney not answering these questions. I suspect there's going to be more. I don't mean floor crossing, but more questions about the leadership. I suspect, though, there is the possibility of more floor crossers because Jeneroux was hesitant, I think, in large measure because of what he saw happen to Chris D'Entremont. When D'Entremont went across, it was just a vicious attack against him. I think that was very concerning to Mr. Jeneroux. He's clearly not as concerned about all of that now, perhaps because he feels there's a bigger degree of cover for people who move across because of the popularity of the prime minister. But yeah, it's tough for Pierre Poilievre, and he will continue to get asked leadership questions for the next little while as people watch to see if there's more.
Zane, the pushback here, not just from Poilievre, is that this is a backroom way of getting into majority government, not as the people intended. The sort of implicit sort of part of that is that maybe if you're going to cross the floor, you need to put yourself to some kind of a by-election. How much weight does that carry with voters? I think voters are generally sympathetic to that, are they not?
Voters across the country, not much weight. Voters within the riding of, let's be specific here, Edmonton Riverbend, probably a bit. Like, this is a riding where you look at, the history of it, and more than likely, this is going to be conservative, even on Mark Carney's best day. But I think there's a few ironies to exploit here. That Matt Jeneroux today joins the Liberals on a speech made by the Prime Minister at Davos, a place that his former leader, Pierre Poilievre, banned any of his MPs or cabinet ministers from ever attending, and that was a popular move at the time. And secondly, the fact that Jeneroux wanted to leave right away, but it was Poilievre that encouraged him to stay, and a floor would not have been available for Jeneroux to cross today had Pierre Poilievre just let him go and not encouraged him to stay until the spring. So those two ironies, I think, need to be put on the table to highlight how bad of a week it is for Pierre Poilievre on this front. I think there's a few things he's actually done quite right this week. Federalist caucus message, which I think was great, and how he handled the Giovanni file, I think, was quite good. But this just highlights a real issue for Poilievre, because yes, he's got an 87% from his membership, but I think implicit in that was 87% in a minority situation. 3 years of this, of Pierre Poilievre hanging on, trying to find the next issue and being on Mark Carney's coattails on the Canada-US file while Trump goes nowhere, that's a very different story than a potential minority election and a snap election being called in a matter of months.
Amanda, Matt Jeneroux got an interesting title out of this, the floor crossing. He is a special advisor on economic security and partnerships, which sounds great. I have no idea, and I wonder if any of you do. Is it a paid job? Does it come with it? Like, are you sort of like sub-parliamentary secretary at this level? Do you have any sense of what this job is, or is it just, here's a title, we'll be happy to have you as a part of the team?
I have no idea.
No one does.
Let me just, I could talk about the hockey game. I don't have it on. I'm still impressed with the fact that Tim is able to commentate while watching the game. Those are skills.
That's a pro over there, I tell you.
It is. That's a pro move. That's a serious pro move. But and let's talk about other pro moves. Carney's pro moves. Carney is attracting support. Poilievre is bleeding it. That is a fact. Poilievre can call it whatever he wants. He can call it a betrayal. He can call it what. But you have to ask the real question. Why are veteran conservatives making the choice that they can deliver better for their constituents under Carney than they can under the conservative banner? Poilievre, what happened today is just highlighting what the polls already show, right? He's strong among his base. He is weak everywhere else, including his caucus. You do not move from your party. You do not cross the floor when things are going well. I think there's some real discomfort with his tone, his strategy, but most importantly, his electability. You also don't move to a minority government unless there's a reason for it. Leadership, stability, the national interest. I think Carney, there's so much that Carney is able to put on the table right now that's attracting these MPs. So when you ask, is Poilievre having a bad day? He's having a bad day. He's having a bad week. He's having a bad year. year. I mean, frankly, he is just a few seats away from what could be a new Liberal majority, and that paints a very different picture. He can get 87% in his leadership review, but that doesn't change his electability outside of it, and people are going to be asking real questions about his ability to maintain the caucus that he has and to turn the channels so that he can start attracting more support outside of his base.
All right, one note, the control room, Tyler has just told me the PMO has confirmed this is not a paid job, so interesting note there. Sherelle, it's interesting, Fred Delory was on earlier saying that he sort of subscribes to this theory that if the Liberals do get to a majority, in a way, you'd have to sort of squint to see it, but in a way, you can see how that would actually be stabilizing for Pierre Poilievre in that he doesn't want to go to the polls right now. This would actually buy him time to solidify his leadership and get out there to try to convince Canadians to vote Conservative. Is that a stretch?
No, I don't think that's a stretch. I don't think it's a stretch because what Pierre Poilievre needs is time. But something that we were told at the Hill Times today, it's reporting by my colleagues Marlo, Stewart, and Abbas, is like 3 separate Conservative sources, 2 of whom are former MPs. The quote was, and this is now it's from multiple people, so there's clearly some sort of strategic cohesion coming, is that Pierre Poilievre has become the Justin Trudeau of the Conservative Party, is what they said. So, and they're not talking about the 2015 Justin Trudeau, they're talking about the 2024 Justin Trudeau, who kind of became a bit of an albatross around his party's neck. And there were machinations and discussions and a lot of pushback to eventually move him out. So yes, I do believe that he needs time essentially for Mark Carney to mess up and for people to kind of lose the rose-colored glasses they may have with him. But at the same time, it also gives his own party time to, if they want to get rid of him, to do so before there is some sort of quick election called.
The quick election call is not going to be the broad election, Zane. It's going to be the by-election. All eyes on the booming metropolis of Terrebonne. Can you think of a more consequential by-election? Certainly I can't think of one in recent memory that might sway the fate of a nation. This is going to be a really big by-election.
Oh, especially given the history behind it and where it's gone. So that's going to be, a very important one. But, in a funny way, Liberals have optionality here. Because yes, they're at 169, if I'm not mistaken, 172 gets them to the majority, 3 by-elections on the table. But we're also hearing that there is a pipeline of Conservatives potentially wanting to go. And so there is, in a funny way, optionality to that majority, if not a greater number than that minimum baseline to get there. And so the Liberals are in a position where they can release one person a day. They can give them unpaid jobs with titles. They don't have to promise cabinet ministerships. They can own the media cycle every day. They can inflict a bit of hurt to Pierre Poilievre every single day should this pipeline line up of folks that are emerging. And even if it's once a week or once every 2 weeks, dropping another person coming in, it's very much helpful to their overall agenda. To go back to the point that Fred made, with all due respect to Fred, I think it makes logical sense until it doesn't, that a majority for the Liberals stabilizes Poilievre's reign as leader. Because yes, it may allow them to get off the issue set. It guarantees Poilievre a couple of years. But inherently in that word guarantee is like, what does it guarantee? This is a Conservative Party whose number one sport is fighting amongst each other and figuring out who they are. I live in Alberta. I have seen this so many times. We watch it for sport here. And the fact that Jamil Jivani, just throwing out a name here, is going freelancing, going rogue, potentially as a name, just throwing one of potentially many now, that may want this job, realizing that this is a 4-term Liberal government. Yes, Mark Carney's on a high, but there's a very good likelihood that the next government is Conservative, that there's people who want this job. And so it can be stabilizing, sure, until Pierre Poilievre waits out this issue set and lets Carney fail. But there's also other people who want this job in this party. Man, it has a history of getting rid of leaders who become liabilities very quickly and without any romance whatsoever.
Tim, I saw you nodding along there. Like the notion that understanding what Jamil Jivani was up to makes a little bit more sense if he knew that there's one or perhaps more Conservatives about that there is something to challenge in terms of Pierre Poilievre's leadership, doesn't it?
I wouldn't ascribe too much foresight to Mr. Giovanni's broader knowledge of the Conservative Party, and that's not to be too mean to the guy. I think there's a broader personal agenda that's at play there, and I think Mr. Giovanni feels he needs to execute on it, which may hurt his chances with the Conservative Party. But just on Fred's theory, look, I've seen that Fred's a very able guy like him, and many others are making that argument today that, oh, yeah, time is on your side. Well, any conservative leader that's looking over his or her back is a conservative leader that should invest heavily in Kevlar and all other forms of body armor. Because, look, to assume that, Matt Jeneroux's passing will pass and people will all say, oh, geez, that's too bad, is a bit foolhardy. And I don't think Stephen Outhouse is a fool. I think he's a bright guy, the new campaign manager, and he'll be have an antenna up. But look, it was like the strategy of waiting out Justin Trudeau. The strategy of waiting out Mark Carney is not a strategy. And I think that's where Pierre Poilievre will get challenged. How is he going to respond to this? What's interesting for me in all of this, Peter, is look, you got a Conservative MP from Nova Scotia. You've got a former Conservative MP from Nova Scotia, a former Conservative MP from Ontario, a former Conservative MP from Alberta, who were never part of a group together other than that caucus. They're coming from different Conservative Party traditions. That ought to be concerning for the leader to figure out why is this happening in different parts of the country. So, hope, as I say, is not a strategy. I don't think Jeneroux leaving is fatal, but it's one that says, hey, we've got a hell of a lot more work to do. But if somebody else goes, then the scrutiny, the intensity, the purchase of Kevlar is going to go on high.
Amanda, though, I get all of the warnings and concerns for the Conservative leader. Jason Kenney, I don't have the quote in front of me anymore, but I've raised it with Hurley and with Delory, had this great quote about there's a cautionary tale in here for the Liberals as well, that you can get caught up in these clever moves and the 3D chess of it all, but voters often find these kinds of moves smarmy, and that can sort of come back and bite you. How careful do the Liberals have to be in terms of how they message this and the importance of, just sort of making sure Canadians feel like this isn't, they don't fall into this backroom deal accusation that Pierre Poilievre is hitting?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. First of all, I don't think this is about opportunism. I think it's about alignment. I think that, even in small pockets, talking to conservative friends of mine who are all like, yeah, Carney is doing a good job. And the polls reflect that. Canadians feel that here domestically and on the world stage, he's leading with the type of leadership that they've been waiting for a long time. So if there's alignment and you're hearing that from your friends and your peers and your neighbors, and you see that some conservative member is crossing the floor, there seems to be some understanding of why that might be. So I think that without that, if you take the opportunism chip out of it and make it an alignment chip, you can understand how people might be able to get behind it. I think there's some other things at play. There's 3 by-elections coming up. If they win those by-elections, those are democratically elected by-elections. You remove the fact that this isn't just about plays that are happening behind the scenes. This is about candidates that can go back to the polls and get the support of Canadians. And then I think the final thing is that if the pipeline does exist, if more conservatives continue to cross the floor, it's not just about, moving towards strength, credibility, and leadership on Carney. It's an indictment on Poilievre and the Conservative Party. And I think that does more damage to the Conservative Party, certainly, than it does to Liberals. Like, I don't understand that spin whatsoever. I think that's really kind of a bit of a desperate spin in order to try to change the channel on this one.
One of the things that I've been trying to figure out is how much, if at all, would a majority government change the legislative agenda of the Mark Carney Liberals? Because like I said earlier, it doesn't feel like they're really struggling to advance their agenda. There are some issues they could point at, but for the most part, this looks like a government that's got a plan, is going out and doing it. How much would change, do you think, if they got a majority?
Well, the mechanics would change, obviously, and that can't be you can't underwrite that too much. I mean,
Like the
committees
committee stuff,
would
yeah.
change, the way they can, move closure, time allocation, all those types of things would change. But at the same time, would still be a very fragile majority. I mean, you get them as you lose in the same way you got them, right? So there's only so much. So does that potentially give backbenchers a little bit more power to say, oh, oops, technical difficulty on that vote that I was voting on remotely because I didn't like that bill? I mean, nobody can get sick. It's still pretty slim, and things are still up in the air. We're hearing names all the time from other parties of people who might leave, other by-elections that might have to be called. So the mechanics of how the government could govern would change. Yes, they are mostly trying to move as though they have a majority, and they haven't passed a heck of a lot of bills unless they get that collaboration right now. So that's all things that have to be taken into consideration.
And I take that point, Zane, but it doesn't feel like this is a government that has needed to pass a ton of bills to do what it feels is most important right now. Am I overstating that maybe?
Maybe a bit. I mean, the go forward is never always the same as what's happened in the past. So there might be a greater need for, a bunch of bills ran through from Parliament, and so then to not have to have a bit of breathing room to be able to do that allows them to help. It also allows them to dominate on the committee side, which cannot be understated in terms of how quickly certain things can be expedited, how much friction is added to that versus a largely frictionless majority government. So those things matter. There's also the broader aspect of not having to negotiate with anyone, right? Not having to find the one or two. There is mental space in this sort of acute era. There's mental space, time, and energy, not just from the government house leader and not just from a couple of MPs, but frankly by the entire operation to find those people to partner with, those other MPs, whether they be on the New Democrats or the Bloc or the Conservatives. And yes, they have optionality, but to take that mental space and apply it elsewhere, I know I'm talking almost like management consultant style, that helps. That helps in the real political world because they can spend pushing their vision, being uncompromising on it. And frankly, if you read the polls, that's kind of what Canada wants them to do. As a New Democrat, I'm not loving a lot of that, but that is what Canada wants them to do. And that is what they'll be able to ultimately push forward in some way. So yeah, these small shifts from a minority to a majority, ever so the slimmest, does help them in substantive ways.
Amanda, I saw you sort of nodding along. What's your take there?
So it was just so well said. Management consulting aside, it was really it was such a succinct way of there's a deliberate and intentional opportunity for the Liberals to move things through, and I think that having to go find those votes one at a time, I couldn't agree more. I think yes, it allows for more mental capacity, but I think it allows for almost like the burden to be lifted, a sigh of like relief that we can all focus on national interests. This is what those conservative MPs looked for: the economic direction, the governing plan, the leadership stability. That kind of clarity that this is what we're doing, this is how we're moving forward without having to play any games, and certainly without having to play any partisan games. I think this is what is allowing Carney to have that appeal. Well, unfortunately, Polyev is repelling, and with his tone and his strategy and his lack of direction. And this is the choice that they're making. But I also think it, again, as I said before, it reflects what we already know in the polls. It reflects how Canadians are feeling.
Tim, all of this makes sense in normal times, but these are not normal times, right? Like, does the weird political dynamic that comes with living in the time of Trump change any of these political calculations?
Well, Trump is the greatest political gift Mark Carney has ever had, right? Mark Carney has been seen by many Canadians to be the and many other people in the world to be the antidote to what is Trump. So as long as Trump is there, unfortunately for us, it's a political benefit to the prime minister. But Peter, we haven't lived in normal times in the last 5 years, right? You go back to COVID, it's been constant tumult. And I think, again, where Carney benefits right now, at least in the way he's perceived at the moment, and I think it is true to his character from what I know of the man, he's seen as competent, he is seen as stable, he is seen as the antidote to everything that isn't that. And why he's doing well with conservatives too, he's not doing what, no offense to Prime Minister Trudeau, but he's not tooling around with social policy. He's not getting into the areas that irritate conservatives who will hold their nose and say, all right, you know what, on most economic issues, generally he gets it right. He's focusing on economics. He's trying to deal with our main economic relationships. So that all works for him. And the challenge for Pierre Poilievre is, okay, if Carney's getting all of this right, where do I get some marks on him to say that he's getting it wrong? And the stuff he comes with, to be fair to him, is hard to mark him up on. And and the one resistant area for Poilievre, which is one he seems to be venturing into now because he knows he has to, is how does he come at Trump? Because there's a whole body of data out there, as you know, that says there is a portion of the federal Conservative Party that has some more positive regard for Trump than others. So for Poilievre, the opportunity, I think, is to find his way into the Trump discussion, linking it with the things that have worked well for him, affordability for young people and the like. But he's not there yet. And Mark Carney is stealing everything from him because of the uncertain circumstances we've lived in for 5 years.
What are the next steps here? What are you watching for? Is it an announcement about the date? Do we know when we're going to get dates on these by-elections? There's 3 of them. Will we get them all at once?
We don't know. I mean, I suppose we could probably assume that's to be the case. But
right.
No, we don't know when the by-elections are coming, so that's obviously going to be something big. I want to see what the actual going forward, what some of the response is going to be. I mean, obviously with the previous floor crossers, they pulled out this is a betrayal. They went after people personally. Yeah. With the Jeneroux situation, you have the extra element of him saying he was going to resign and now has turned around.
But everybody said
on
very
that.
nice things about him then. It would
Exactly.
be relatively hard to...
And there's already people who...
By the way, the black cat just went across the screen. Sorry about that.
Well, symbolism.
I think, yeah, it could be. I mean, so I'm going to be watching for how are people actually going to be responding, and how, we had the statement from Pierre Poilievre, but as time goes on, last time this happened, back in November, he was asked directly, does this mean you have to reflect on your leadership style? And he gave a very definitive no.
Hard no.
So it will be very interesting to see how he now moves forward in that, because he's come back from the convention. He's talked about collaboration. They just had that moment in Tumbler Ridge where everybody, was literally linking arms and hands. So how is he going to move forward if this is the new normal?
Zane, what are you watching for in the days and weeks ahead here?
Yeah, if I expand it out to weeks ahead, it's what is Pierre Poilievre going to try to manifest or engineer as his core issue? Because it cannot be a yes and to whatever Mark Carney's doing on the Canada-US file. And if he wants to pass that file up, say, you know what, this is not going to be my strength, this is not how I'm going to win, what is it going to be? Is he going to choose a wedge issue like immigration, which many have suspected he was on and then off on in terms of really forcing? I'm, for one, very glad that he did not choose separatism and was unbelievably unequivocal in terms of his Federalist caucus, adding to the ranks of Carney and Harper and others. I'm very happy that he went there. But what wedge is he going to choose? Because let's be clear, the guy's got skills. For the longest time, we've been living in Pierre Poilievre's world. And it was not long ago that he was dictating terms because he chose inflation, cost of living, was the first on that issue, molded our political world around that. I'm not saying that was only a one-time thing, maybe likely a one-time thing, but what is he going to try again? Because he's going to have to choose something to mold in his worldview and get enough people to gravitate to, because it can't just be, yeah, the prime minister's doing well, and I wish he had done this. That's not going to get him the attention, and it's not going to create the distance that he needs and the space that he needs in between this Liberal government that more and more people are aligning with these days.
Tim, it's no Olympic hockey game, but everyone's going to be watching Pierre Poilievre's speech. And is it next week that he's got his big speech?
At the Economic Club in Toronto. And look, they're certainly promoting it a lot. A lot of people talking about it. I think it's a good opportunity for him because part of what he has to do, whether he goes on the Trump tack or not, I think he has to say more about Trump, is to show more of his prime ministerial bona fides. Again, where he suffers in comparison and you see this in the polls, is along those measures, best equipped to deal with these things. He's a great advocate for young people. He's a great advocate for those who are feeling disenfranchised. But I think people want to see this. That's a good setting to do it. And hopefully for him, by the time he gets there, he won't have to answer more questions about floor crossers or Jamil Javani's latest international trip to save the world. So one hopes for him there's some calm.
Amanda, last word to you. Do you foresee calm in Pierre Poilievre's future?
No. I think that he's been tried and tested in this way. We may have been living in Poilievre's world, but I don't think a lot of us liked it there. There was, a lot of name calling, and there were a lot of slogans, there was a lot of divisiveness and a lot of ugliness, and I think that tone turned off a lot of people. And I think despite the fact that he knows that it turned off a lot of people, especially women, he has been unable to prove to himself, his caucus, or the country that he is able to turn the channel on his own ability to do that. He's he's a master communicator, but he communicates in one way. So unless, I don't know, something major changes in the next little while and somebody is able to convince him that he needs to attack these issues in a new way, especially with what's happening across the border that people feel appalled by, I think that it will be his Achilles heel. And I think that's the thing to watch.
Well, and that's a word to end it on. Boy, am I ever glad I was able to get you guys in to make sense of all this today. The Power Panel, Tim Powers and his Black Cat, Amanda Alvaro, Zane Velji, and Sherelle Evelyn.